9 tragic cases of missing children. Children are precious. A parent's love for their children is unparalleled, so when a child goes missing it destroys the lives of those parents who loved and cherished their offspring so dearly, and often captures the undivided attention of a whole country, or even the world. This list takes a look at 9 tragic cases of missing children. For obvious reasons, the word top has not been included in the title, as each one of these is as heartbreaking and catastrophic as the next. 1. Steven Stayner. Our newspaper, the television, even the internet, are jam-packed with big news stories every day vying for our limited attention. The stories certainly have varying impacts on those who see or hear them. But one that should resound mightily with Mitrust has to be the rescue of J.C. Lee Dugard after 18 years as a kidnapped victim. We've been down that same road before. Most folks who have lived in Mitrust for a while should be aware that a similar situation played itself out here almost 30 years ago. A long-lost Mitrust child was found hundreds of miles north of here after being missing for 8 years. Of course, I'm talking about the Steven Stayner case, the subject of books, television programs and ongoing media attention for decades. In nearly 39 years with the Sun star, the Stayner story was the biggest one I ever covered. That Sunday morning in 1980, I scrambled along with photographer Gary Keever to quickly get up to Ukiah and report on the Stayner boys' miraculous return. It was thrilling to be part of that massive news-gathering operation and such a happy story as well. There are parallels between the Dugard story and the one about Steven Stayner. In both cases the trail was stone-cold in finding those children until the twisted fabric of mystery quickly unraveled itself. Just one event or one person can set things in motion. A seemingly innocent clue may be all that's needed to crack the most stubborn of cases. People know things that would solve these cases, but won't come forward, for any number of reasons. The Stayner boy had been snatched off a busy Mitrust street by child abductor Kenneth Parnell and an accomplice while walking home from school in 1972. Initially, many people got involved in searching for the Stayner boy, but nothing came of those efforts. At lunchtime I responded once to a scene just inside Mariposa County where officers were digging to find the boy's body. The suspect's confessions were bogus and thankfully nothing came of that incident. But when Parnell abducted another young boy, Stayner had enough. By then a teenager, he didn't want young Timmy White to go through what he had experienced. After Parnell had left their remote mountain cabin on Saturday for his desk clerk job down at a downtown Ukiah hotel, Stayner and the boy hitchhiked along the winding coastal road into Ukiah where they walked into the lobby of the police station. People report all sorts of things to dispatchers, from trivial and inconsequential to monumental. Young Stayner told police he thought they were looking for him. Instantly, one of the toughest abduction cases on record was solved. As I replay the circumstances of that police station encounter in my mind, I still get chills. In mere hours the Stayner story became worldwide news. A media frenzy ensued. The boy was joyously reunited with his family. I wish I could have witnessed that emotional reunion here, but there were parts of the story in Ukiah that needed to be told where Parnell and Stayner had lived for several years. More or less the same thing happened in the late August case when 29-year-old J.C. Dugard was rescued from sexual predator Philip Garrido after vanishing 18 years ago. The Dugard experience should give renewed hope to many people whose loved ones have vanished. Mitrust County has a number of people who have gone missing. Some of them may still be alive, caught in a tangled web like that woven by Dugard and Stayner. I'll never forget my part in telling the Stayner story, which has been pushed into the corner of my mind until this new saga made it fresh once again. 2. Fusaiko Sano. Fusaiko Sano is a Japanese woman who was kidnapped at age 9 by Nobuyuki Sato, and held in captivity for 9 years and 2 months from November 13, 1990 to January 28, 2000. In Japan, the case is also known as the Nagata Girl Confinement Incident. Fusaiko Sano, then a 4th grade elementary school girl, disappeared on November 13, 1990, at age 9, after watching a school baseball game in her hometown of Sanjo, Niigata Prefecture, Japan. A huge police search failed to find the missing girl. Police even considered the possibility that she had been kidnapped by North Korean intelligence operatives. She had been kidnapped by Nobuyuki Sato, then a 28-year-old mentally disturbed unemployed Japanese man, who forced her into his car, and subsequently held her on the upstairs floor of his apartment in a residential area of Kashiwazaki, Niigata Prefecture. for 9 years and 2 months. The house is only 200 meters from a Koban police substation, and 55 kilometers from the location where she was kidnapped. While Sano was initially scared, according to her own statements, she eventually just gave up and accepted her fate. Allegedly, the kidnapper kept her tied up for several months, and used a stun gun for punishments if she did not videotape the horse racing on TV. Sano was also threatened with a knife and beaten. Her kidnapper shared his men's clothes with her and gave her food 3 times per day, either instant food or meals cooked by his mother, who lived downstairs in the apartment. He also cut Sano's hair. Since there was no bath or toilet upstairs where Sano was confined, she was only able to take a bath infrequently, when permitted by her captor. She spent most of her time in captivity listening to radio, and reportedly was allowed to watch TV only in the last year of her ordeal. While the door was never locked, Sano did not take a step outside for 9 years. She later told the police, "I was too scared to escape and eventually lost the energy to escape." Mr. Sato pleaded guilty at Niigata District Court to abducting a minor and unlawful confinement resulting in injury, GG Press News Agency reported. The court heard how Mr. Sato kidnapped his victim at knife point in November 1990 as she was on her way home from school in Sanjo, a town 50 kilometers from his home. He stuffed her into the trunk of his car and took her to his home in Kashiwazaki, 250 kilometers, 160 miles, north of Tokyo, the prosecution said. Her hands and legs were allegedly bound with adhesive tape for several months and she was banned from touching the door of her second-floor room. Mr. Sato used a stun gun to punish her for crimes such as failing to properly videotape the horse racing on television, the court heard. In the beginning of her confinement, Sato put a knife to the girl, hitting her with his fist and threatening her, the prosecutor said, according to GG Press Agency. The girl was held captive for 9 years and 2 months. The case only came to light in January when Mr. Sato's 73-year-old mother called a doctor after noticing her son's strange behavior. His mother said she had no idea the girl was being kept in her son's room. Mr. Sato was deemed mentally fit to stand trial following 2 weeks of hospital checkups. But Mr. Sato's lawyers asked the court to allow him to undergo further psychiatric tests, said GG Press. More than 2,200 people queued up for just 27 public seats in the court, according to reports. The girl's father was also in court and stared at his daughter's tormentor throughout the hearing. Sano has been quoted saying she was too terrified to escape. "I was too scared to escape and eventually lost the energy to escape," she reportedly told police. The girl reportedly had a radio for 8 years, but was only allowed to watch television in the last year of her captivity. Police were heavily criticized for failing to investigate Mr. Sato, even though he was arrested in 1989, for trying to kidnap another girl and was on probation at the time of Sano's disappearance. 3. Eloise W disappeared from her home in the Melbourne suburb of Beaumaris on January 12, 1976. W's brother raised the alarm about her disappearance when he noticed she was not in her room at 7:30 a.m. He later told police he heard robbers who kidnapped his sister, but was too scared to say anything at the time, because he thought they would take him too. There was no sign of a struggle. Investigations revealed no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Police believed W was lured from her bed by someone she was familiar with and simply left the house via the front door, which had been left unlocked. Another possibility not discounted was W may have been abducted by a prowler known to be in the area at the time. A speeding car down W's street at 2 a.m. was reported by a neighbor. Bark from a tree outside her window was found on her bedroom floor. A small hole had been cut in the fly screen in her window, but forensic tests revealed it had been cut from the inside. Police believed it was too small to have been used by the abductor. Because scientific evidence found it unlikely that Eloise was taken through her open bedroom window, both parents were initially treated as suspects. Despite the biggest missing persons search in Victoria's history and despite a $10,000 reward posted in 1976, that remains unclaimed, no trace of her has ever been found. Homicide cold case detectives began reinvestigating the case in 2001. 27 years after Eloise W was snatched from her bed in the dead of night, her mother yesterday said that the family had long ago accepted the 8-year-old's disappearance as a mystery. Speaking after coroner Frank Hinder ruled it was impossible to identify who is responsible for Eloise's disappearance, Patsy Worledge said the family had come to our own form of closure years ago. Eloise Ann Worledge was taken from her home in Scott Street, Beaumaris, in the early hours of January 12, 1976. A fly-wire screen on her windowed window was partially cut and rolled upwards, and the window was fully open. Her abduction sparked the biggest Victorian missing persons search in history. Despite a recent 12-month reinvestigation of new leads, a homicide squad detective confirmed the case still baffled police. Detective Senior Constable Robert Nazreshan told the Melbourne Coroner's Court that despite Eloise's father, Lindsay, being the prime suspect at the time of her disappearance, a 2001 investigation found no evidence to implicate either of Eloise's parents as the culprit. And new investigations of known sex offenders, including a teacher and a librarian at Beaumaris Primary School, failed to uncover any new evidence, he said. Outside court, Ms. Worledge said the family had been devoted to learning from our experiences, to healing and accepting the mystery. And it is indeed a mystery. And we don't actually need to know, she said. Lindsay Worledge was not present at the hearing. Senior Constable Nazreshan said evidence suggested someone had staged the scene to look as if the fly-wire screen was cut from the inside to avert suspicion from people connected to the Worledges. The motivation to cut the screen from the inside by an intruder with no connection to the household seemed inconceivable, he said. But entry, exit or both was most probably made through the front door, which Ms. Worledge said she had left wide open, Senior Constable Nazreshan said. The court heard that both Lindsay and Patsy Worledge had been having affairs at the time, and Mr. Worledge was depressed about their looming separation. He was to move out of the house the day Eloise went missing, a fact Senior Constable Nazreshan described as striking in its timing. He said that in 2002, Ms. Worledge told police that at the time of Eloise's disappearance she believed Lindsay Worledge was involved in the disappearance, as a means of prolonging the inevitable, and as a way of spiting her. Mr. Worledge denied involvement in the abduction, and a lie detector test proved inconclusive, the court heard. Convicted sex offenders interviewed when the case was reopened included a teacher, and a school librarian at Beaumaris Primary, as well as a man who coached at the Beaumaris Junior Soccer Club. But police could not uncover any evidence of their involvement in Eloise's disappearance, or any evidence linking sex killer Raymond Mr. Stinky Edmonds to the crime. Suspects at the time included Ms. Worledge's two female friends and her sister, Margaret Thomas, but a reinvestigation of their police interviews found the links baseless. Giving an open finding, Mr. Hender said Eloise was a shy girl who would not have voluntarily left home with a stranger. He said significant information given to police included a neighbor's account of hearing a child cry out, and a car door slam at 2 a.m. on the night of the disappearance. It is not possible on the evidence to find who were the person or persons responsible, or when and how Eloise met her demise, but her disappearance and presumed death remain suspicious, Mr. Hender said. 4. Megumi Yokota. Nearly 30 years after a 13-year-old girl in northern Japan was kidnapped by North Koreans, her abduction still elicits anger. President Bush mentioned the kidnapping during his news conference with visiting Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi on Thursday. "I just could not imagine what it would be like to have someone have taken, my daughter, one of my daughters, and never be able to see her again," Bush said. "What kind of regime would kidnap people? Just take them offshore?" That is the exact question Megumi Yokota's parents have been asking for almost 3 decades. Mystery solved? On November 15, 1977, Megumi was kidnapped by North Korean agents near her house in Nagata, in northern Japan. "We had no idea of what happened to her," said Seiki Yokota, Megumi's 70-year-old mother, who met with Bush in the Oval Office this spring. "She just did not come home, and we have not seen her since then." After years of silence, Kim Jong-il, the leader of North Korea, made an astonishing revelation in 2002. He said that North Korea had abducted Megumi and 12 other Japanese people. The Yokotas had hoped to reunite with their daughter, but it was too late. North Korean officials say Megumi, who suffered depression, killed herself in the 1990s. Many Japanese residents, including the Yokotas, however, do not believe Megumi is dead because North Korea hasn't presented solid proof of her death. Megumi is believed to have married a South Korean abductee, Kim Yong-nam, and conceived a daughter, Kim Hye-jin, an 18-year-old who attends school in North Korea. Kim Yong-nam is now married to another woman in North Korea and has one son with her. The North Korean government arranged a surprise family reunion with Kim Yong-nam and his family, which took place the day before Bush and Koizumi discussed the abductions and pledged to work together for the resolution. Kim's 78-year-old mother and 48-year-old sister traveled to North Korea to see their long-lost family member for the first time in 28 years. Bush's comments about the kidnappings came on the heels of Abduction, the Megumi Yokota story, a recently released documentary chronicling the abductions by two Canadian filmmakers. "Americans know almost nothing about this," said Chris Sheridan, who co-directed the film along with his wife, Patty Kim. The filmmakers traveled to Japan for a special showing of the documentary. "Every time we show the film, the response is the same," Kim said. "People are very, very moved by the Yokota family and all the other families and their struggle. But they, the Yokotas, are just ordinary people, and in November of 1977 they were just like you and me." Sheridan said he and his wife had read newspaper accounts of the kidnappings when Koizumi had visited North Korea 4 years ago. "When we heard the story from across the ocean, it completely shocked us," he said. Most of the kidnappings took place during the 1970s and 80s. Japanese activists say that there may have been as many as 100 kidnappings. Sightings of other abducted Asian citizens, such as Thais, also have been reported in the north. In the movie, a former North Korean agent said that abducted Japanese citizens often taught Japanese language and customs to intelligence agents who were later sent to Japan. Koizumi may attempt to visit North Korea before his term ends in September. However, no announcement has been made. North Korean officials insist they have no more information to offer on past abductions. However, Japan still believes a number of its citizens remain in North Korea against their will. Although political tension increases around North Korea, the abductees' families and their supporters hope this will not slow down the effort to rescue their loved ones and are calling for international attention. "Japan should not yield," Seiki Yokota said. "We will not be fooled by the North again. Japan and the rest of the world should not turn their back on them." 5. Ethan Patz. Ethan was last seen walking to his school bus stop in the New York City borough of Manhattan on May 25, 1979 at approximately 8 o'clock a.m. His family resided in an apartment on Prince Street near West Broadway. The stop was on Prince Street and Wooster Streets, 2 blocks away. This was the first time Ethan's parents allowed him to walk to the bus stop alone. He has never been heard again. Ethan was carrying a blue cloth bag imprinted with elephants, and $1 for a soft drink at the time of his disappearance. His mother watched him out the window until he crossed Wooster Street, 150 yards from the bus stop. He has never been heard from again. Ethan's bus arrived at the stop at 8:10 a.m. as usual and picked up a number of children, but Ethan was not among the group. Ethan's first-grade teacher at Independence Plaza School realized he was absent but did not report it to the principal, so Ethan's parents did not realize he was missing until he failed to come home at 3:15 p.m. that day. After checking with neighbors to see if he was with them, they notified the authorities. A known pedophile named Jose Antonio Ramos has been the prime suspect in Ethan's disappearance for many years. Photographs of him are shown below this case summary. Ramos was a drifter with mental problems, who was known for assaulting young boys as he crossed the United States in the 1970s. He tended to prefer boys with light hair, like Ethan. Ramos was in New York City at the time of Ethan's 1979 disappearance. He also dated a woman formerly employed by the Ethan family to walk the child to and from school during a school bus strike. He was suspected of stalking the woman and molesting her son before Ethan vanished. Police believe Ramos may have seen Ethan accompanied by the woman, therein inadvertently leading Ramos to the child. Ramos claimed he was with a boy matching Ethan's description the day the boy disappeared. He described Ethan's sneakers with their distinctive fluorescent stripes. Ramos went on to state that he introduced himself to the child by telling him he was a friend of the former employee, then took the boy back to his apartment and attempted to sexually assault him. But, he told police, he stopped when Ethan resisted his advances and put the boy on a subway bound for Washington Heights so the child could visit his aunt there. Ethan has no relatives living in Washington Heights, however. In 1983, Ramos moved to Watersmeet, Michigan with an unidentified light-haired boy, aged about 13 or 14. Ethan would have been about that age in 1983. Ramos left the area after he came under suspicion for molesting several boys. Police photographed him and the boy while they were in Michigan. Later, when they examined the photographs, they noted the boy's resemblance to an age progression of Eden and decided to track the boy down. Ramos had told People in Waters Meet that the boy's parents ran an orphanage in Columbus, Ohio. The boy had been arrested there, so his fingerprints were on file. Police compared the prints with Eden's. They didn't match. To make absolutely sure, authorities approached the teenager and obtained a DNA sample, which conclusively ruled out the possibility that Eden and the boy were the same person. In 1985, the focus of the investigation briefly shifted to Israel, where a magazine there ran a photograph of Eden that had been taken by his father, with the caption Eden Benheim. The photo was not among those that had been handed out to the press, so police were suspicious as to its origin. However, attempts to determine the source of the photograph were in vain and the investigation centered back on Ramos. Two of Ramos's former cellmates, working independently of each other, told authorities that Ramos made incriminating statements about Eden's disappearance, and claimed that the boy's body would never be located. Ramos allegedly said he'd been stalking Eden and knew the child's school bus route. He is currently serving a 10 to 20-year sentence in Pennsylvania for molesting a boy who, like Eden, was blonde. New York investigators elected not to file charges against Ramos in Eden's case in February 2002, citing a lack of evidence. Eden was declared legally dead by a New York judge in 2001. The action allowed Eden's family to file a civil wrongful death lawsuit against Ramos, although he has never been charged in connection to Eden's case. Ramos initially refused to give a deposition on the matter. In March 2003, a Manhattan Supreme Court judge ordered Ramos to answer questions under oath about what happened to Eden. Ramos gave a statement in October 2003, claiming he was in a park with a 8 or 9-year-old boy named Jimmy whom he'd met in Washington Square Park on the day of the Eden's disappearance. Two police officers approached him with a picture of Eden at around 11:15, or 11:30 a.m., and asked if he had seen the child. Ramos claimed that after the police left him, he took Jimmy to an apartment. He invoked his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination when asked whether he sexually assaulted the child. Authorities give little credence to Ramos's story. Eden was not reported missing until the afternoon of the day he disappeared, and investigators would not have circulated his picture for some hours after that. Ramos's story about his whereabouts at the time Eden vanished has changed several times. Ramos refused to answer many of the questions in the deposition, so the judge presiding over the lawsuit found him liable for the child's wrongful death in May 2004. The judge ordered Ramos to pay $2 million to Eden's parents, but as Ramos is destitute it is unlikely that any money will be collected. He is scheduled to be released from prison in late 2012. A carpenter, Othniel Miller, was briefly a suspect in Eden's disappearance in the spring of 2012. Eden had helped him the day before and Miller had paid him $1. In April 2012, after a cadaver dog detected the scent of decomposing remains, authorities searched for Eden's body in the basement where Miller's carpentry workshop had been. An extensive dig revealed nothing. Miller has always maintained his innocence in Eden's case. In a surprise turn of events, in May 2012, just before the 33rd anniversary of Eden's disappearance, a suspect confessed and was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. A photo of the suspect, Pedro Hernandez, is posted below this case summary. He was 51 years old and lived in New Jersey with his wife and daughter at the time of his arrest. When Eden disappeared he was an 18-year-old stock clerk in a bodega in Eden's neighborhood. Hernandez had made vague statements to his family as far back as 1981, about having hurt or done something bad to a child, and sometime in the 1980s he told a church group he'd killed a child, but he never went into detail and never mentioned Eden's name. After seeing news coverage of Eden's disappearance during the search for the child's body at Miller's former basement workshop, someone close to him remembered his statements and reported him to the police. In a 3.5-hour interrogation, Hernandez told investigators he lured Eden into the store by offering him a soda, took him to the basement and strangled him. He then put the body in a plastic bag and took it out with the trash. He said he had not sexually abused the child and couldn't explain why he'd committed the murder. Hernandez's attorney stated he suffers from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and has auditory and visual hallucinations. After his arrest, He said he was suicidal and was admitted to a hospital to treat his mental health problems. Authorities are attempting to verify his statements. He has no criminal record and had never been a suspect in Eden's case until 2012. Other people who worked in the bodega were questioned in 1979, but not Hernandez. It's possible that, even if his confession is accurate and provable, Eden's body may never be found. Eden's whereabouts remain unknown and his case is still open. Foul play is suspected in his case due to the circumstances involved. The journalist Lisa Cohen wrote a book about his disappearance, titled After Eden. It was published in 2009. 6. Johnny Gosch. On September 5, 1982, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch was kidnapped from Des Moines, Iowa while delivering the local Sunday newspaper. Normally, Johnny's father, John Sr., would accompany him on his route. However, on this day only Johnny's dachshund, Gretchen, was with him. The night before, Johnny asked his parents if he could go on the route alone. They told him no. Johnny left his home without his parents aware he was leaving. At 7:00 a.m., John and Noreen Gosch began receiving telephone calls from people who had not yet received their morning paper. John then went looking for his son. He found Johnny's wagon that was full of papers 2 blocks from their home, but no sign of Johnny. The worried parents immediately called the police. They were forced to wait 72 hours before they could file a missing persons report. Noreen maintains to this day that the police were slow in investigating her son's case. Witnesses reportedly saw Johnny talking to a man at 42nd Street and Marquardt Lane. The man was driving a blue two-tone Ford Fairmont with Nebraska license plates, and Johnny appeared to be giving the man directions. Some reports state that after Johnny walked away, he was taken by 2 men and forced into the Ford Fairmont where he was held down in the back seat as the car sped away. There were no other sightings of Johnny until a few months later. In March 1983, a 12-year-old boy, matching Johnny's description, approached a woman leaving a store in Oklahoma. He said to her, "I'm John David Gosch. Please help me." Before the woman could do anything, 2 men approached the boy and led him away. She later reported this to police in October 1983, after seeing Johnny's photo during the NBC movie Adam. She immediately phoned authorities and the FBI later confirmed that they believe it was Johnny Gosch, AMW.com. 1 month later, Noreen received a phone call. On the other end was a boy who said, "Please help me. Please help me. I can't get away." Noreen asked if the boy was okay, and he said that he was, although his speech was slurred. "Where are you?" she asked, but the caller hung up. Noreen was convinced it was her son. Unfortunately, police were unable to trace the call and the lead slipped through their fingers. The West Des Moines police did not believe the calls were legitimate, but Noreen insisted the caller was her son, but even her own husband doubted her. In 1984, Johnny's photograph appeared alongside that of Juanita Rafael Tevez on milk cartons across America. They were the first 2 abducted children to have their cases publicized in this manner. That same year, on August 12, another boy was abducted while delivering the Des Moines Register, the same newspaper Johnny was delivering the day he vanished. Eugene Martin, 13 years old at the time, has never been found. Like Johnny, Eugene normally did not go on the route alone, his stepbrother usually accompanied him. But on this day, it was just him. Noreen believes they are connected. In 1989, Paul Bonacci, a young sex offender imprisoned in Nebraska, came forward and told attorney John DeCamp that he was in a sex ring with Gosch as a teenager and was coerced into participating in Gosch's abduction. Bonacci mentioned several people involved, including law enforcement officials, politicians, and business owners. In 1992, America's Most Wanted aired a segment featuring Johnny's case, and with the help of Paul Bonacci, several composites were drawn of the people involved in Johnny's kidnapping. The FBI made several failed attempts to keep the show from being aired. After AMW aired, Noreen received a 14-page letter from a guy named Jimmy. In this letter, Jimmy gave detailed information to Noreen about her son. In March 1997, Noreen claimed she received a visit from Johnny who told her what had happened to him. However, he could never come home for good because he knew too much about this pedophile ring and feared for his life. In 2000, Noreen published a book called, Why Johnny Can't Come Home. In 2006, Noreen began receiving several pictures of Johnny bound and gagged, proof to her that he had been kidnapped. Through the years, Noreen has endured many threats against her life, yet she remains strong and convinced that Johnny was abducted by this ring. She believes that former CIA agent Michael Aquino bought Johnny for $35,000 from a farm in South Dakota and then took him to Colorado, where Johnny began a program in torture, mind control and prostitution. In 1975, Michael Aquino founded the Temple of Set, which according to Wikipedia.com, is an initiatory occult society claiming to be the world's leading left-hand path religious organization. It professes Sichan philosophy and magical practice. In July 2008, Noreen released information about a second man, named Tony, who helped kidnap Johnny. 2 composite sketches were made of how the abductor looked in 1982, and then 10 years later. It just so happens that this sketch is the same composite sketch of the abductor in the Michaela Garrett case. 7. Ben Needham. Police investigating the disappearance of Ben Needham 25 years ago found dozens of bone fragments yesterday during a search of an olive grove near where he went missing. Officers launched a fresh bid to discover what happened to the toddler, after a new witness came forward to claim he may have been run over by a digger and buried. Acting on this information, a team of officers from South Yorkshire Police travelled to the Greek holiday island of Kos to begin the search yesterday. A digger could be seen moving piles of dirt to an adjacent field where officers and local volunteers began the painstaking task of sifting through the dusty earth for fragments of bone. The site has been searched before, when officers took cadaver dogs onto the land in 2012. The new search will involve digging deeper, and will focus on one area following information from the witness, who came forward following a TV appeal in Greece 4 months ago. Ben was 21 months old when he went missing from a farmhouse, which once sat on the site in July 1991. His mother Carrie, who had moved to the Greek island from Sheffield, always believed he was abducted. Then, earlier this month, the claims emerged that Ben could have been killed. The witness alleged digger driver Konstantinos Barkas, who was working at the farmhouse, killed Ben. Barkas died last year aged 62. His family have denied he had anything to do with the boy's death, and he was interviewed by police after Ben disappeared. But his friend reportedly saw the driver, known as Dino, sweating and shaking after returning from the police station. Barkas allegedly told a friend it's possible there could have been a tragic accident. Yesterday, the search team focused on the top left-hand corner of the land, leading to speculation officers had received very specific information about the whereabouts of any evidence. But the detective in charge of the hunt said it was too early to say if the bone fragments are linked to Ben because the land has been used for grazing animals for centuries. Detective Inspector John Cousins said, "I have every reason to believe that the matters he, the witness, discussed are of great significance." The search in 2012 was based on information known at the time. The new information that has come forward, all of that put together, gives me a very strong reason to be here for the next week or so. He added, "I can't say exactly how many bone fragments we've collected today, but it's quite a lot." The detective said during the 2012 dig they discovered 481 bone fragments. A police spokesman said they were finding bones on the former farmland yesterday every moment. Asked if he expected to find answers, Mr. Cousins said he was optimistic about the search taking place, raising the prospect that Ben's mother may finally learn what happened to her son. Miss Needham is understood to be at a secret location close to Kos, where she is being updated by police. After years spent campaigning for fresh searches for her son, she is said to be in a highly emotional state and is angry the witness took so long to come forward. She told the Daily Mirror, "Not even in my worst nightmares has Ben ever been dead. Until now. I've been waking up and finding my pillow wet with tears." This witness told police, "We deserve the truth, but we deserved the truth 25 years ago. I feel like he's only come forward because Dino is now dead. How can you hold on to such a secret as serious as that and for all of those years?" 8. Edward and Austin Bryant. Austin and his biological brother, Edward, went to live in the home of Edward Eugene Bryant and Linda K. Bryant in the late 1990s. Originally foster children, they were adopted by the Bryants in March 2000. Austin was 4 years old at the time and Edward was 7. They were considered special needs children and the Bryants collected more than $1,700 a month from the El Paso County Department of Human Services for their care. The couple adopted 9 children in all, including a younger biological brother of Austin and Edward, and Linda had one biological daughter, who also took in foster children. Photos of Linda and Edward Eugene are posted below this case summary. They lived in the 18,000 block of Granite Circle in Monument, Colorado between 1999 and 2005. In January 2011, authorities were notified that Austin was missing and hadn't been seen since sometime between 2003 and 2005. When they investigated, they discovered Edward was also unaccounted for and was last seen in 2001. The other children in the family had been forbidden to talk about them. When questioned, Linda at first claimed the children were living with her, then claimed they had gone to visit their biological mother in Oklahoma, then admitted they hadn't lived with her in years. Linda and Edward Eugene stated both boys had run away from home, but they gave different information as to when. Linda said they both ran away in May 2003, and Edward Eugene said Edward ran away in 2001 and Austin in 2005. Their adoptive parents never reported them missing. Someone billed Medicaid on Edward's behalf in December 2003, after he is supposed to have vanished. Investigators determined that Austin was enrolled at Monument Academy Charter School until August 2003, when he was withdrawn, supposedly to be homeschooled. They could find no school records or medical records for either Edward or Austin after 2003. Once the children's adoptions were completed, the state was no longer allowed to send social workers to check up on them, making their absence easier to conceal. Linda made active efforts to make it look like the boys were still living with her. For example, she printed photographs of other children off the internet, displayed them in her home and claimed they were pictures of Austin and Edward. James Bryant, the boys' adoptive brother, and Ricky and Brian Pennington, both foster children of Linda's daughter, were the ones who came forward about Austin's disappearance in early 2011. According to James, Austin was beaten, denied food several times a week, and locked in the garage for days at a time. Brian said Austin had told him he'd been locked in a trunk and shocked with a taser, although Brian admitted he hadn't actually witnessed these incidents himself. He said he had seen Austin wrapped up in blankets so tightly that he couldn't move. James said he believed his adoptive parents might have killed Austin. He said he had never met Edward and had been told the boy had been sent to relatives in Arizona. The Bryants moved to Texas in 2005, and then separated sometime afterwards. They filed for bankruptcy in 2007, and listed $126,125 in adoption benefits as part of their income. They listed 8 children, including Austin and Edward, as dependents. They still had 5 children in their care by 2011, a 6th is in prison and the 7th, James, is a soldier stationed in Kentucky. In February 2011, the Bryants were arrested and charged with multiple counts of theft, conspiracy, forgery and attempting to influence a public official. They had collected approximately $175,000 in benefit payments for the children's care after the children were no longer living in their home. Edward Eugene said he had no knowledge of the families receiving benefits for the children. Linda admitted she had deliberately covered up their disappearances in order to keep the payments coming. Linda faced 148 felony counts and Edward Eugene was charged with 13 felonies. None of the charges are related to the actual disappearance of the children or the alleged abuse of them. Linda and Edward Eugene have denied having abused or killed either Edward or Austin. Their other 5 minor children are now wards of the state of Texas. In January 2012, Linda pleaded guilty to 54 felonies, 4 counts of theft, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit theft and 48 counts of attempting to influence a public servant. In March, she was sentenced to 42 years in prison. In April, Edward Eugene pleaded guilty to 5 similar felony charges, 19 other counts were dismissed. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Extensive searches in Colorado have turned up no indication of Austin or Edward's whereabouts, and authorities fear they may be dead. Their cases remain unsolved. 9. Madeline McCann. Somebody knows what happened to Madeline McCann on the night of May 3, 2007. But who, and could they ever be persuaded to speak the truth? On the 10th anniversary of the 3-year-old's disappearance, from a sleepy Portuguese holiday resort, BBC reporter Richard Bilton revisited the case, for a panorama special at once unnerving to sit through and impossible to turn away from. He had returned to the Algarve to bear witness to what had happened, yet also, it quickly became clear, to move the story forward and connect, as best he could, the dots of a mystery that refuses to be solved. Looming throughout was the horrible presumption that McCann, who would be a teenager today, may no longer be alive. However, because of the tangled web that quickly enmeshed the investigation, the case also remains luridly fascinating. A tragedy has acquired the trappings of farce and, as relayed in this often gripping documentary, the resulting melodrama possessed the couldn't-make-it-up quality of the pulpiest whodunit. In 2007, Bilton was one of the first reporters on the ground in the quiet seaside town of Bryant, Eloise. As he returned to the now notorious complex from which McCann vanished a decade earlier, his unease was unmistakable. "I have a weird relationship with apartment 5A, he said. "It's a bland apartment. But something weird happened here. A little girl went missing and she's never been found." Confronted head-on was the theory, still clearly favored by elements within the Portuguese police despite a total lack of evidence, that McCann's parents were involved. With the faintest hint of showmanship, we were presented with apparently damning clues from the original inquiry. Cadaver dogs detected residue of McCann's blood in the holiday apartment. Further traces were later uncovered in the family car. But the rug was quickly pulled away. The dogs weren't all that reliable, the car not hired until nearly 4 weeks after McCann vanished. Kate and Jerry McCann were not interviewed by Bilton, though a family friend angrily protested their innocence. To this web of innuendo and conspiracy theories were added the findings of a later Metropolitan Police investigation, an inquiry which, it was asserted, then Home Secretary Theresa May was pressured into green-lighting by a campaign in the Sunday, enter an entirely new cast of possible villains, 3 locals whom British detectives suspected of involvement in a small-time burglary ring. But again, anything approaching hard proof was howlingly absent. As with the footage of Kate and Jerry McCann frosty under media cross-examination, you were left to play amateur psychologist as Bilton tracked down one of the trio. Was he shifty or merely confused? The viewer will have seen whatever they wanted, the trap into which at least one of the 2 investigating police forces seemingly fell. As a final flourish, Bilton produced what he asserted to be another suspect, an employee of the complex at which the McCanns were staying, who was later questioned by British police. In what was pitched as the compelling climax to the documentary, Bilton doorstepped, or at least boat-stepped, the man at his new job as a coastal tour guide. A ghastly pall fell over the former receptionist, horror at the suggestion he had any part in McCann's death or abduction. Madeleine McCann, 10 years on, had a lot of ground to cover and, though the broad sweep was always clear, the minutiae were harder to keep up with. The one genuine bombshell was the revelation that, during the initial media feeding frenzy, individuals acting on behalf of the McCanns asked Bilton to spy on other journalists. Entirely unexamined was the question of motive. Even if burglars had broken into the apartment where Madeleine and her 2 younger siblings were sleeping, what would have motivated them to kill or kidnap? Why had Met investigators singled out the receptionist? So dense was the sprawl of evidence, Bilton didn't have scope to address why as well as the who. Nonetheless, the BBC is to be commended for not pursuing a more sensational path. True crime was the lowliest of genres when McCann vanished 10 years ago. Today it is painfully voguish, with shows such as Making a Murderer and The Jinx utilizing real-life tragedies as a springboard for artsy cinematic odysseys. Bilton stuck to the facts and left his inner auteur at home, and for that he is to be praised.